Hi everyone, well I'm in the most iconic of venues here in Northern Ireland, namely in the Titanic Centre, where we have just finished the Belfast Chamber Belfast Forward conference focusing on connectivity. It has been a fantastic day, and as promised, because I posted this morning before we started, what I want to do now is tell you all about what we've been discussing. Now, the way in which Claire Guinness, the CEO of Belfast Chamber, had shaped this day is start to the present, talk about what is Belfast doing, why is it different, what capacity is it building, and then from there trace a line into the future, looking at sustainability, technology, looking around the world at what's happening and weaving in regulatory, financial, business model and societal trends to really get a sense of where connectivity was going. So on that note, let me take you through a whistle-stop tour of various different things that I learned today. Number one, did you know that Belfast was the first city in the world to have 100% broadband connectivity? Did not know that. Also, Joe Kennedy III was here live and in person, and he said when you bring politics, business and civil society and they all pull together, anything can be achieved. Then we heard from Belfast Airport, and Belfast City Airport to be specific, and they were talking there about how they now have electric vehicle chargers, how they plan to be net zero by 2050 and before that if possible, and also how there's more law firms in Belfast than any other regional city in the UK. Also, Katie described that Belfast City Airport is a vital artery in the network of Northern Ireland. Now, what's going on in Belfast Port is a whole other ball game as well. We heard from Michael, who said that methanol is the fuel of the future, and the focus there is on autonomous vehicles, hydrogen energy, and also offshore wind farms. Then we went on to hear from TransLink and a really, really interesting project happening there. TransLink is seeking to be carbon positive by 2050, and also the Weavers Cross programme is going to enable 20 million passengers to travel through it on an annual basis. Then we next heard from Mark Price from Queen's, and he was talking about how 4 different listed companies actually were spin-outs from Queen's University Belfast, and he talked about the role of collaboration between universities, business, government, collaboration in general, but not just institutions but also views. And he said that equity, diversity, inclusion builds success, and big projects need big funding mechanisms. Then we moved on to a conversation around digital and data, and a key outcome that came from that is that things are becoming more sensorized and data is being used to compare user behaviour to expectations. That's a really important point. If we expect people to behave in a certain way, understanding how to use data to compare against what we think might happen versus what does happen can then improve user interface, can improve the data collected, as well as just basically how to enable that consumer or citizen change that needs to happen in order to make, whether it might be a green revolution happen, and so on. Now, we also then heard about video anomalisation and how that can help spot trends or when something is amiss. So if you are collecting data on maybe video data and you're looking at maybe gender, or you might be looking at consumer patterns when it comes to any sorts of consumer behaviour that you want to test, let's say for example retail trends in an environment, or of course this also could be done from a crime perspective. So whether it's something that you want to encourage or discourage, how video anomalisation can help with that. Now, moving on then from there, another thing that came up over and over again is that many businesses, of course, seek to be profitable. And if they seek to be profitable, well then business is a derivative of cost. In other words, decisions that you make, for example, pricing, will be driven by cost. However, more and more in the future, companies are going to also have to think of a derivative of the environment. And that could be maybe from the perspective of stranded assets. If you are doing business in a place that could come under real pressure from climate change, or maybe from a CSRD reporting point of view, or let's just say, one example that was given today is that if a requirement of your buyer is that you can provide whatever you're providing in a carbon neutral or carbon positive way, if you can't meet that, well then you may be less costly than your competitor, but if you can't meet their green or energy needs, well then you may not be in the running at all. So it was just making the point that business needs to consider derivatives of cost and environment. And also a case study was given today that Sydney's car decongestion was feasible if it removed only 10% of the cars in the city. And of course then you think about incentives of how to do that and so on, but it just shows you that decongestion is maybe achievable through something much smaller than a huge change. Now, then moving on to aircraft. So how can aircraft become more sustainable? 3 ways. Number 1 is advanced materials. Number 2 is novel propulsion. And number 3 is electrification of aircraft. Now you might say, hang on a second here now. Electric aircraft. Did you know that the first transatlantic flight using entirely sustainable fuels has already happened? And one of the trends that happened, one of the observations that I had is I asked a question today at just after lunch, and I asked people what were their takeaways from the morning so far. And I was expecting like statistics or technology or connections, but no, actually, what people said was that they were really fascinated by how much was already possible and functional, and secondly, the sheer volume of opportunity and depth of possibility in Belfast and in the Northern Irish region, which is super, and of course part of what today was all about. Okay, then we were also then talking about Project Harlander. Project Harlander on Belfast Port, or in the Belfast Port region, is that is a project that is seeking to be an autonomous vehicle where it will deliver people for across the 1.3 mile journey from the Titanic. So it will dramatically increase the connectivity from exactly where I am now into the city, but it also would be happening, of course, without an actual human driver, and would happen every 15 minutes on a loop. And what that, of course, means is that it increases the public transport connectivity of the city, and if that works, well then, of course, other possibilities are and can await. There was loads of questions in about that as well, and about how quickly it was going to happen. Now, the next thing then was we talked to Chris Brown about distinguishing hype from reality. Okay, so if you can really think about what is possible in a period of time, at least then, rather than think about what's aspirational, you can clearly plot a pathway forward. So Chris said, in order to move forward, we need decarbonisation, we need autonomous vehicles, and we also need demand to happen at a critical mass stage so that supply can feasibly and economically meet it. And we need to remember that there may well be a focus of usership, not ownership. If autonomous vehicles are possible, if I can push a button and I know that I can get an autonomous vehicle as quickly as I could from a public transport app at the moment, or private transport app, well then why would I need to buy a car? Maybe I might want a car, or maybe there might be aesthetic reasons why I might, but that's what he's talking about, is usership rather than ownership. Another one for you. Northern Ireland already generates 45.8% of electricity from renewables, and demand is expected to grow by 50% because of electric vehicles, as well as the electrification of energy in households. We heard from Russell today that it will cost £9.7 billion, with the vast majority coming from the private sector, but this would lead to 13,000 employees in the green economy in the future of Northern Ireland. Also, Invest in I, today Rachel told us about how they were showcasing innovation that's happening here in Northern Ireland, in Singapore and Malaysia, and that there's a great supply chain, particularly for heat pumps here in Northern Ireland. Then we also heard how hydrogen is already powering TransLink buses, and Catagen wants to decarbonise the air, a really interesting company to keep an eye on. Also, we heard about, to get to net zero by 2050, we need behavioural, tech, regulation, financial, business model changes, and also green shoring could be the new unique selling point of the region. So green offshoring is when you go to a different region so that you can get a lower cost, let's say raw material or labour. Green shoring is where you could actually be in an environment where there is green energy available and there's low carbon budget. There would be, because of the energy that would be powering the manufacturing or whatever else, then it would be a more carbon efficient place to do business, and that could be a real USP for Northern Ireland. We heard then from Saudi Arabia that they're making turning off-the-shelf vehicles into autonomous vehicles and all sorts of things that Mark told us about. And then imagine this, right? So I can plan on Google Maps how to get from A to B in the fastest time, but imagine if I could use something like that in order to understand, to make the lowest carbon impact of a journey or any other decision. And also, another conversation that was happening today is that using AI to understand how to decrease the lithium required in order to make battery and other storage, which can then, of course, can actually power a much more sustainable version of AI. It's been an amazing day, loads to take away. And Claire Guinness certainly said that the legacy of today is to go ahead and to turn this opportunity into reality for Belfast and the wider region. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here. It's been fabulous.